So, as usual, we're here, and this is unscripted. Renee in Montana. My lighting is crazy once again. Let's see. You gotta get this really freaking dialed in. Okay, I'm just bouncing light right now. So I thought, I would get dressed on camera instead of undressed on camera. So this shirt is from the World Domination Summit, Chris Guillebeau's Art of Nonconformity. I might be dropping names here. You came for a specific reason. The topic is self-sabotage, lack of will to live, and the third part of it was, oh God, this is intense. I'm going to be present with myself. There's a really important topic here, failure to thrive. So this is not a topic that anybody really wants to talk about. I didn't want to talk about it. I'm probably going to reveal something either today or in an upcoming episode about the real where this realization. It'll probably be today because I think that I just have to do it because it pertains to this conversation. So let's just get the elephant out of the room or the elephant out of the box or whatever. So I've been having these health concerns. They weren't really concerns until they were. They were symptoms, and I was justifying them in all sorts of ways. And I had a suspicion for a while that I eventually had to go to a dentist and have teeth pulled. Ooh, this is really intense. And in having teeth pulled, the protocol afterwards, they don't really talk to you about it. They go, eat pudding, it's a soft food. Eat Jello, it's a soft food. Well, that led to a major sugar binge, to which I was really feeling crappy. So I went to the doctor and said, I got to find out why my teeth are rotting in my face. That sucks. Sucks. I didn't want to do it. Didn't want to do any of it. So I went to the doctor and I said, I'm afraid that I have diabetes. And he said, what are your symptoms? I'm like, primarily dry mouth, achy all over. I had some other symptoms. I don't even remember what they were. Because if when you go to the doctor and you're afraid of some things, it's easy to forget what you said during that period of time. At least if you've had trauma and you know how to check out. Denial. That's the word. So I'm now seeing a therapist too about all of this because I realized that I can't do it alone and that a team behind me as I go forward is going to be really useful. And I don't want anything that I say to come off as like ungrateful or what would another word be? More denial. And so just bear with me. Thank you. So I've had some revelations. I have trust issues with authority, and I have some ideas about where all that came from. And we might get into it somewhere down the road if it's helpful to you. Like, I don't think that I'm coming here and I'm kind of coming clean, and we could consider this almost like confessional. In fact, I've thought about that. I've thought about having my own confessional, confessing not my sins, but my maybe fears and resentments, if I can do it in a way that doesn't hurt other people. I know blaming, that's the thing. Blaming others and then blaming myself. like really working with that. Uh, I've been working with Dr. Russ Kennedy, who is an MD, medical doctor by training, now an anxiety expert. And um, he has this concept called JABS: judgment, abandonment, blame, and shame. And when you get news, lucky news, good news, bad news, it's easy if it's good news, take all the responsibility for it. But if it's bad news, blame everybody. And I watched myself do this in this case. And I did it in wild ways. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that I have to, take responsibility for my own life, my own self. And so, what does that mean in this case? Well, first of all, it's in just telling the truth about my experience. And it's doing so in such a way that I might actually have this experience be helpful to others. So, trust, especially not trusting authority, some abandonment stuff and projection, like projecting that I'm going to be judged. And so I judge myself. I spend all my time judging myself and don't take action on what needs to be taken action because I've had this experience, some of these symptoms for a few years even, and I kept justifying what those what all of that meant. Now, I could have been totally wrong and that my blood sugars were just fine. And that is not how it turned out. Here's an interesting thing, a fascinating caveat, and something that I see between Dr. Russ and my new physician's assistant, who is phenomenal. He's really good. And he built trust in me very, very quickly, similar to the way Dr. Russ did. And I was not ever Dr. Russ's patient, but I can imagine him being a little like this, using theater and using, in Russ's case, more comedy. This guy's like pretty straightforward and not as comedic as I can imagine Dr. Russ being. But every move he made seemed to have, and I let myself be guided along this. So, for example, I came in saying I'm worried about diabetes, and he said, "Oh, dry mouth. There's something called Sjogren's." And so, of course, I went searching for Sjogren's, and that's a rheumatoid condition associated with lupus. So you don't want that either, right? You don't want diabetes, you don't want cancer, you don't want a lupus rheumatoid related disease. But the only way to find out is to get blood work done. So I went to the dentist. The dentist then said, "Here's the protocol. Go ahead and eat pudding because that's okay on your mouth." That sent me into a sugar, like, uh, and when I came to the doctor and I said, um, "I've been on this sugar binge." It was like confessional, right? "I've been on this sugar binge and I feel terrible about it, and I don't know what the blood work's gonna." This is the day that they're taking the blood, right? Drawing the blood to do the blood work, and I just have confessional with the doctor, with the PA, the doctor, for all intents and purposes. And I just confess about binging on sugar for a month because instead of coming immediately in and getting the blood work done 2 weeks after I got my teeth done, I instead just checked out, dissociated, and ate fucking terrible things that I typically don't even eat. That before I had my teeth out, I wasn't eating. But of course, I wasn't eating a lot when my teeth came out either because I had an infection in my mouth and it hurt to eat. And now it's weird to eat because I have some teeth missing. I'm going to put on another layer. So, I'm putting on clothes as I'm talking about confessing and unburdening myself of my fears and resentments. So, The good news today, I live on an Indian reservation. I didn't know that this was happening. I happened to be driving past and I saw that there were people in this park and I was like, what is going on with the people in the park? So I run my errand, I come back by and um you're getting to watch me tear my necklace apart. That's not what I want to do. Dang it. All right, so that's messed up now. See what happens when you try to rip on things. All right, hopefully I can get this on without doing that again. Um, so where was I in my story? Why am I telling this? Well, a lot of what I do is to help others feel not so alone because loneliness is a terrible thing. And I don't like feeling alone. And I have felt alone in the last few years. Oh, the other revelation I had. Well, after the therapist was like, denial, sugar, I should such good things. Sugar is highly addictive, and denial is one of our most well loved and often used uh, sources of keeping ourselves, so we think, safe. So I spent the last couple of years in denial and also working on my diet. Not exercise, not quite as much. I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but the pandemic, instead of inspiring me to exercise, I found myself sitting in front of the computer more and also um, just yeah, computer time and not really enjoying. I enjoyed being outdoors, but we were kind of like supposed to like be on lockdown, lock in, whatever that's called. Oh, I should be showing off the things that are back there. Instead of standing in front of the TV, I'll stand in front of the window and you can see what's on my shelf on my TV because that's like, oh, by the way, one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm dismantling my house. So if you listen to some other videos, I'm showing and telling some of what that dismantling my universe is all about after 5 years living here. Now, so failure to thrive. I don't know when it happened with that term. When it crossed my path, I was like, I get it. I get that. I understand that. And in my career, I think I have failed to thrive, and I'm not still working on that. But, and here's the thing when I lost everything a few years ago, one of the experiences that I had is that I was being told that I had this plethora of a network, and I just didn't know how to tap it. So, jump forward three, 3, 4, 5 years in that zone, 3, 4, and 5 years. So, the first 2 years, I after the final crash, I lost my mom first, my dad second to death. I fought for my inheritance, and it was a really wild business ride. And when you're dealing with inheritance and family, it can be a real wild ride and it can take a while. So that was partially my experience. You're getting all sorts of backstory right now. So I took my that inheritance and instead of doing what I had done each time when I lost a parent, which is kind of not do anything, like don't make any huge decisions at that time, sort of stay right where you are for about a year. And then after you like recombobulate yourself, um, start making decisions and taking action. Or if you've made decisions, start taking action, right? And that can be all sorts of things. And this sort of prevents you from getting into a manic state where you are just going like, I feel terrible. I'm having this existential crisis because some big part of my life just got turned upside down. And so I'm going to take whatever resources I can and I'm just going to flee. Now, some of us have that propensity. Some of us hunker down and hide out and get depressed. I happen to be on the side of take quick action and believe that I'm right. And I was, it was recommended to me after I lost my dad in particular, and there was insurance money and inheritance money involved to slow my roll and not make any drastic decisions. And that was great advice. And that's what I recommend to people as well. But when I finally fought through and fought for the last piece of the inheritance piece and was awarded it, um, I was exhausted. I was coming up on the death anniversary of my mother. She she died when she was 42. Or did she even make it to her? I don't think she made it to her 43rd birthday. So I was coming up on 40, 41, 42, and I'm like, oh my God, life can be so short because I realized just how young I was. And so I um, made the decision that I was going to chase my dreams and chase them hard. And I would get a hold of that money and I would make it work. I was smart and talented and I would make it work. And now that I think of it, this is when my blood sugar spikes probably really kicked in, like hardcore, 5 years ago, because I was having some of the worst symptoms at that time. Um, but we don't know because I didn't go and get blood work. And I didn't go and get blood work because I was afraid. And I didn't go and get blood work because I didn't have the money. I didn't go and get blood work because I had the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality that going on Medicaid or Medicare or social services was not a good thing to do. I had family members who were suggesting it, but I felt so ashamed that I couldn't get my life together and my shit together that I wouldn't even heed their advice because they were the ones who told me, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And social services is a disgrace. And if they didn't put it in those words, it was their attitude towards that when they when those kinds of stories came across the news. And so we don't know what we're doing to and for our kids. We don't know what we're doing to and for our kids when we're talking back to the TV. And we can't help ourselves but to have opinions. So we're going to do it and we're going to screw up our kids. It's just a fact of life. So I don't want to get into that. This is not blaming. I guess that's what I want to say. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just trying to give backstory, context to why maybe I made some of the decisions I made. Plus, I didn't trust authorities, doctors, and I had fear that I was going to get bad news and I would have to change my life, which gets into lack of will to live. Mm, nobody wants to say that out loud. I sure shit don't want to say that out loud. I feel like if some of the people that I consider mentors heard me say that, they would be aghast. And yet, I don't, and yet I had a friend, Yvonne Fox. She died a few years ago. I have two things. I miss that woman. And yesterday, I just got news that my friend Leo King died. And Leo King was this big brute of a man in his youth. He grew up on a small farm out or ranch. So he's a farm boy, ranch boy, out just outside of the town that I'm living in right now. And when I met him, he was an old man, probably not as old as I had thought. And to look at him, you might have thought that he was on serious drugs, but he had Lyme's disease and some other things going on, and it made his blood boil and his lymph do all sorts of crazy things. Maybe I shouldn't be speaking of this man, but I want to just say that he faced his life and his death with the kind of grace and wisdom that you can only hope for. And you also hope that you never have to face what he faced and the diseases of the body, because it wasn't comfortable at all, very painful, and yet he still faced it. And my friend Yvonne Fox, she did the same thing. Eventually, she was diagnosed with eyeball cancer, and they took out her eye, and that was wild. And one of the ways that she faced that was through humor, and she would put on like these crazy eye patches, and she would put stickers on her eye patches. And that woman would come up with a reason to laugh for everything so that she could keep living. And I I sat with her when she was going through some of the deepest, hardest stuff of her life. I was a young woman who was dedicated to being present with people when they were unraveling from stress and pain. And she was my best friend. She had the character of being, um, she was all women to me. She was mother, grandmother, sister, auntie, best friend. She was just an amazing person. And she didn't like me at first. I and I would always tell her that too. I'm like, you did not like me at first. And that's okay. That's it's it happens. But I liked her and I was dedicated to figuring out how I we were gonna be friends. And I was gonna learn from her. And I did. I learned so much from her. So as I'm dismantling my house, I'm again having to face that I have letters written back and forth from her to her um, lover who ended up in prison for, I mean, and when I tell you about these characters that I've been friends with in my life, you're like, who are you? He was a martial arts guy, very skilled in that way. Um, he ended up going to prison for acid, like selling acid to cops. And Yvonne said, and I warned him, and I knew that we were being like stalked. And luckily, she was not in the house and didn't wasn't associated with it at all. But there were all of these factors for her in regards to that. There was also a motorcycle wreck where she broke her femur, and on, stories of her life. Maybe I have pieces of them on videos on phone somewhere. I have a house full. Let's talk about existential angst. I have a house full of content that I've been producing, but it's not produced until it's actually in the can. That's why I go live to these things. That's why I just get on camera and trust myself and trust my ability to improv and trust myself to bring it back to our point. Existential crisis, failure to thrive, and lack of will to live. That's our topics for today. So here's the thing. I realized, and I told the therapist this in our first session. It was like 40 minutes of me just going, let me tell you everything that's like the whole backstory. And then in the last 5 minutes of our session, I was like, and here's what I want to work on. Being in relationship with one person where it's like I am expressing myself and communicating in such a way that's like good for both of us. And we're both being seen and heard, and I am getting my needs met. And right now, that's not happening. And right now, I'm not feeling like I'm treating this other person very well. And that's what I'm looking forward to. And that's what I want. I have more will to live. But 5 years ago, when I'd taken that inheritance that was my father's hard work, and I cashed out on this land holding company with my entire family, and there's a huge story around that about how shitty families can be towards one another and how shitty adults can be to little kids if they feel like those kids are a threat to them at any point in anywhere, somewhere down the road, or they're just shitty people. They're just kind of mean spirited naturally. And you're weak because you're young. You're the little one. And you haven't been here on planet Earth as long as they have, and they think it's fun and funny to give you shit and to leave you out and leave you behind and make fun of you. And those people were the people that I was in business with by inheritance, by being the only child to my father, who a blood child to my father. And if I didn't exist, it would have been split up amongst his siblings. And I did exist, and so therefore I was enemy number one. It's just in the nature of humans. It's just in the nature of humans to do this weird shit to each other. You have to be quite evolved. You have to actually care about doing it better. And here's the thing, those people, except for two of them, and I laid it down like, you need to apologize to me for this thing that you said that was so sucky that I don't want to be in business with you. And I absolutely don't trust you. And if you want to regain that trust, it starts with you giving me an apology. And you know, when you set precedents like that, it's really unlikely that it's going to happen. So then you have to be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to draw a line in the sand that says, this is as far as it goes. And this is the only way to redeem our relationship. And the ball is in your court. And I am not responsible for taking it any further. It's entirely up to you. And I will be amenable if you made that choice, if you walked forward with the olive leaf. But this is the olive leaf for you. This is the olive leaf for you. The other people, we did a good professional job in completing that contractual agreement and finishing the estate. It took 11 years or thereabouts after my dad died. And I can speak to that and the roller coaster ride that was and is for some people and how it can hang on like that. There are reasons to stay in business with people, especially if it seems like you don't have to do a lot for the business. Anyway, there were a lot of lines that were drawn in the sand, if not outwardly, certainly inwardly. And that is a piece of the puzzle that I bring to the table because I've done it. I've done it with my family, the last of my family, on my father's side. And here's the hopeful part, because I promised this would be hopeful on some level. It actually did help. With almost all my relations, I have a much better relationship. In fact, tomorrow I'm going out to my family's place and I'm helping. My cousin is having a grand opening on Saturday, and I have a prior obligation up here in Hot Springs. So I'm going down 2 days ahead of time, helping make salads, meeting up with the whole family, connecting that way. And then I'm coming back up to Hot Springs and I'm doing the next level of my own work in my own life. Because as I said, my house is being dismantled for a move. And I'm anticipating that this move is leading to greater expansion. After a great restriction over the last couple of years, and thank God I had this sanctuary. But it didn't thrive during the pandemic. I wasn't thriving when I arrived in Hot Springs. I hadn't been thriving for the few years before. And I can just look back and go, a lot of not thriving. Why is that? Because I am and always have been a smart and talented woman with moxie. A smart, talented woman with brazen and moxie. Why was I not able to hold success and stability? And I have a lot of thoughts on that topic, and I will approach them later on down the road. I kind of am just laying down the baseline of this. And this is part of why the curriculum for Remarkable You is designed the way that it is. And without it being right in front of me, there's a business component and a project management component, which we all need to know how to do. It's the missing link in art school. Even though there are business classes, they should be upfront. It's same with healing arts. They should be upfront. It's some of the most difficult, um, especially for healers and artists. It's some of the most difficult puzzle pieces to reconcile yourself with is the business side of it. Because we just want to create and heal and be good to people and create, as an artist, whatever your art form is. We just want to do that work, the work, without having to be with business. But the thing about business is it has to get dialed in. And at the same time, you have to be practicing self-care. And if you are not skilled in self-care because the people in your life, your caretakers, your caregivers, couldn't show you um, love and understanding, couldn't show you compassion, didn't show you help you feel safe to bring your challenges to them, and that they could support and help you through them, that your caregivers, it was really all about them and their needs. And as an adult, I can understand where all that was coming from. As my parents, my mom was 19, my dad was 25. They were just babies. My parents were just babies. And my dad had lost his father, had plans for his life, and suddenly he's being held back at home working on the family ranch, reiterating his dad's life, who didn't want to come and do the ranch. My dad wanted to go into the military. He wanted to go to war, partially for the discipline of it, partially to get the hell off the ranch and out of Dodge. My dad wanted a different life. And when his dad drowned in a pond a few miles from the family home, and my aunt, who was 15 at the time, found her father floating face down in the water, it was devastating to the family. And that that trauma, on top of all the other traumas in their life, which I don't need to get into, but because we all have family histories, we all have skeletons in the closet. Some of us are much more sensitive. I fall into the very sensitive category on lots of different levels. And I did not grow up in a family that protected the most sensitive one. In fact, their motto was, we got to toughen this one up. It's a dog eat dog world. She's a girl in a man's world. This is not an easy, we just have to toughen her up. So we'll be hard on her. That was how I grew up. I'm not complaining. I'm not blaming. I'm just saying, and my perception is that that's what it was. And later on, near the age I am now, and a good portion of my life, I'll say this, because I have gotten in touch with my inner 6-year-old, along with my inner 17-year-old. My inner 6-year-old was more forgiving, but it was way harder on her. My inner 17-year-old, she is fucking righteously resentful of the shitty ways that people treated her, and got a chip on the shoulder, right? About all of it, about the world, about who you could trust. And it was, you can't really trust anyone. And I have to do this all myself. But I'm a strong girl. I'm a good girl. I'm a strong girl. I'm a smart girl. I can figure it out, and I'm going to win. That was my attitude. And people stepped aside for that woman, that young woman. But the failure to thrive, it just kept rearing its ugly head. And then I would sabotage myself. And self-sabotage, it's a real thing. We have all sorts of ways of doing it. We might do it in our career. We might do it in our personal life. We might do it on every level. We might rotate the way that we do it. And the only way to start to actually heal that is to get in touch with the inner child, 6 and 17, and invite them into our life and love them and nurture them and love them and nurture them and talk to them and love them in the way that they needed. And that's every age in between too. loving them and nurturing them the way that they needed to be loved and nurtured so that they could be their awesome, optimal self. And they didn't get that. And they got chips on their shoulders and they got wounds that wouldn't heal. And they got all sorts of things that created this failure to thrive, whether it's a mentality or it's just habit patterns. So, what do we do once we realize this? Well, I'm going to take it a step further. Lack of will to live. Again, nobody fucking wants to say that out loud because that does not fit into the paradigm that we are here to be positive, productive members of society. Well, I bought into that too. And the existential healing arts philosophy has been one of the best things for me to help me to move through this, which is life is not easy. And we constantly get handed weird shit to deal with. And when that happens, the best thing that we can do is just to accept what is and then meet it head on. Or, if you need to, find ways around it, what it takes to keep living. But here's the thing I realized I think it was a deep down a protective mechanism. And, we're meaning makers, meaning making machines, we humans. So maybe I'm just making meaning out of something that isn't really real, but it is to me. So I guess it is. And that's a good philosophy to live by. It's like if you believe it's true, then it is on some level. Nobody can come in and say that your experience isn't real, and you can stand up for that experience, and that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm typically an optimistic person. I don't like the toxic positivity movement or the positivity movement that can become toxic. So you need to understand that about me. Optimism and positivity are not the same thing in my book. People who've known me for years see me as optimistic. I see myself as optimistic. So it was a real kind of whoa to have this realization. And I had this before, but I hadn't said it out loud. And when I got the diagnosis, the diabetes diagnosis, when the doctor came in the room and he said to me, as he's sitting down, "You have diabetes." Part of it's a relief because now you can start to understand why you'd been feeling so shaky all the time and why the dry mouth and the dry eyes and why you had this fear and why you were making the choices to treat your diet as much as possible like you might have diabetes because maybe you could hold it off longer or slow down the impact of it. And you've been in denial and you didn't want to know, but you did want to know because maybe you didn't. Maybe you had Sjogren's. And I was like, Sojourners? I'm going to have Sojourner's disease. Sojourner's disease. I'm getting on the road. Like, officially running away from all of it. Sojourners. It's not really a disease. It's like a syndrome. I don't know what the difference between a disease and a syndrome is. Anyway, I had to grapple with that I don't trust people. I don't want people to talk about me. I don't want people to make me into a disease. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's good for the mindset. I don't think it's good for our mental health. I think we have to deal with shit. And I feel grateful, and I cannot tell you how many prayers I've sent up for my body that somehow has managed to keep this person alive without having to be on pharmaceuticals. And I also recognize that in not doing something sooner, I may have reduced my lifespan. And I also realized that in doing something now, I may have increased my lifespan and that we don't know. And this is where this existential idea comes in. We don't know when our last day is, even if we do know. When there are pictures of me and my dad on this road trip 3 weeks before he died. And it was one hell of a road trip. My father was 55 years old and had never been to Yellowstone National Park. He had lived his whole life in Montana and never been to see what the park. And the park is magnificent, but where I grew up, I seen as beautiful, awe-inspiring. But grew up in a place where we could relate. But my dad, it was like a bummer. Like he never felt as a rancher he could ever take any time off to go and do anything. That every season there was something that was absolutely necessary and needed to be done. And plus, we didn't have a lot of extra money ever. Not to say, I mean, and there was always food, but I always remember there always being stress around money. So I had chips on my shoulder about that and chips on my shoulder about who and why things were the way they were. And as an adult, I understand how challenging it can be in rural communities in rural America, and why I think that I like the idea that the internet levels the playing field, but we're still coming from behind because you have a lot of people who are still afraid of the internet, and rightly so, because they are not particularly. It is the Wild West in a lot of ways. So my dad had never been to Yellowstone, and we're in Yellowstone. We're down there for my um, his. So my dad didn't get, or did he didn't get married to this woman, Becky, and her daughter Lori, but it was Lori's wedding. And in a way, Lori was my competition. She came along 12 years. She was 12 and I was out of high school. And my dad, in a lot of ways, because he learned to be more conscientious of the woman in his life, and he liked this woman, I think, better than my mom. And he liked the girl, Lori, too, because she was into the things he was into, horses and rodeos and stuff like that. And I wasn't. I was like a theater kid and into, well, just different things. My dad and I had a pretty good relationship. I admired him a lot. I saw him as he could have gone to college and gotten a degree in history or philosophy or geography or geology. Any of those my dad would have excelled in and actually been a good teacher. He was that kind of person. But he was on the ranch and being a rancher, and Lori's way of being and Becky's way of being was easier on my dad than me and my mom, who were artists. We didn't really fit in with the family, and they let us know that often. And again, it's not blame. This is like, even as I say this, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that's so human. We're so human. We're so tribal. This is also kind of natural for us to behave like that. Then you have to make a conscientious effort to do it differently. And most people aren't up for that task. And I mean, I wish it was different. And maybe these videos will lend to that. Maybe people will like use these videos and go, oh, there's another way. This gets back to the curriculum. Self-care, original thought, sense of humor. Those are topics. These are teachers that I'm looking for right now to participate in creating this curriculum for this school. And those are some of the topics. And existentialism falls into self-care, in my opinion. I'm trying to think of what some of my other classes, doesn't matter. Jumping ship there for a second. Let's come back to my mom and my dad. So So this is the household and family that I grew up in. My dad could have been a college professor. He's a rancher and has never gone to Yellowstone National Park, and it's like a bummer. So in the car ride, first of all, my dad picks me up, hasn't ever been to my house in Helena, which is an hour and a half away from where I grew up and where he lives. In the 5 years I lived in Helena, my dad never came once to see me. He only came to pick me up only on my insistence that I wouldn't meet him out by the main highway because I wanted him to come and see my house. And the thing is, he in his life wouldn't have lasted 4 weeks later, three weeks more. He was dead in a car wreck, and not of his own doing. Not of his own doing. He was a passenger. 2-ton truck, horse trailer, horses spilled out all over the ground, humans spilled out all over the ground. Wreck. 16-year-old kid, Randy, after football to go see his girlfriend, doesn't pay attention to the stop sign, runs the stop sign, hits the 2-ton truck, everything spills out on the ground. People end up dead and damaged. And when your life gets turned upside down like that, you start to look at things differently. You start to be grateful for the fact that on that trip, you and your dad had a knockdown, drag out fight, and you told each other all the things that you had been holding against one another, and you forgave one another. And there's a whole story to that. It's a beautiful story about what that looked like and how potent and poignant that day was, and how people stopped to check in on me in the midst of it, out in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, as I'm walking up the road alone, and some man is sitting back there in the car yelling at his daughter, back in the car, "You're still my daughter." And me saying, "I can't do it like this anymore." And then walking in the blazing heat up the hill and getting to the top of the hill, not knowing if he's going to be there, and he is. And the last bit of the trek up the hill in the heat of the summer in August, heat. No shade, heat, praying the whole time up the hill. How do I do it? What do I do? How do I do? What do I do? Finally, I'm tired, I'm overhot, and I am all talked out. And it comes to me, you have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself, and you have to forgive him. Because I'd been blaming myself for years that I could not, that I was a terrible daughter. And then blaming him for all the reasons why I was a terrible daughter and he was a bad dad. When in reality, I loved him deeply. And I was really sad that we had grown so far apart. And when I got to the top of the hill, we're walking towards one another and tears are coming. And I just said, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I love you so much." And he said, "I'm sorry too." And we hugged each other and cried and cried. And then we went on with the rest of the trip. Dinner. He bought me dinner. He told me about his grandparents. Here's a while ago, I started to say this in the pictures from that trip. It looked like the specter of death was leaning over my dad's shoulder. There was a shadow that came across him. I don't mean this to scare anyone, but I do mean to say sometimes maybe we do know that our time is coming to the end. My dad was having severe panic attacks at the time, but maybe he'd always been having those panic attacks because the specter of death was letting him know that his time was coming. But if you live with that all your life and that anxiety and those panic attacks, that can be debilitating. So I've been working with an anxiety doc who is excellent and calls me out on my shit. And um, because of him, I meet this physician's assistant and I go, they're all on my team. They're all on my team. And I've been calling in my team. There's one more story I have to tell. When the lack of will to live set in, it was on my birthday. I don't remember what year. I think 2018. Can't figure it out right now. It doesn't matter. But the inheritance money was gone. I still owed money. I had to let a couple of people who were helping me in my work um, go because I didn't have money to pay the labor costs. And one after another, I had to move into it was a 3-bedroom house that was this ticky tacky little throw it up in a few seconds with crappy materials house. And the type of house that if somebody farts on that side of the house, everybody can hear it in the whole house. It almost like echoes and reverberates. That kind of house. You can hear people out on the sidewalk talking, all the cars going by. It's like a shoebox. And 2 giant dogs. And I did not want to do any of it. I didn't want to do that, but I had to. And I didn't feel well. And I um, got on Medicaid, I think, at that point, and was seeing a therapist. And the therapist was telling if you hate this living situation, you got to figure out something else. And it was my birthday, and money was so tight. It was just nuts. Um, like a miracle every month that I was able to somehow pull it off. And I don't even know how it got pulled off. I don't remember how at this point, but it did. Odd jobs and such. Family probably coming through. I don't know I don't. Because when you have lack of will to live, you're certainly not keeping like close track of things because that would require way too much energy. So it's my birthday, and my boyfriend takes me to, and I don't remember why he had to take me to do this, or if it was like just going to be a part. He then took me out to eat. I don't remember, but he takes me to the temp agency, and I have to do these tests and fill out paperwork to try to get a real job through the temp agency because things have gotten this desperate for me. And it's my birthday. And it was such a humiliating moment in my life. And for some people, I don't I don't know if this is like that level of humiliating, but for me it was. And I could hardly think straight. Probably a high blood sugar day, looking back. So because that's like my ability to think. I mean, but I was just going like I'm under so much stress. And I was under so much stress. And my background is in body work, so I'm deploying every trick and tip tool I know, except I'm not getting body work, which is fascinating. Like that level of self-care. But when you lack a will to live, self-care is like low priority. And anxiety. Why does it take us so long to ask for help? Why does it take us so long to take action? A big piece of it is we don't believe we deserve it, but another piece of it is lack of will to live. And I'm not going to say it's okay. I'm just going to say that it is. Sometimes it is. And so at that point, I get a job, but it doesn't start for weeks. Out of this experience, I get a job, and the job is at a factory, and I'm a widget girl. My eyes are starting to change, so I don't know why I have headaches all the time. I'm crying constantly. And I'm like, it's just because of the stress, and I hate my life. And, but I'm going to get better, and I'm going to figure out how to do this. Like, there was this thread of health in the whole thing that I have inherently a strong thread of health that I lack the will to live because I guess I didn't because I was forcing myself to get up in the morning and go to work. And was like tolerance, diligence, letting the world sort of create the structure. I went to this factory, and one of the things that happened is I could listen to podcasts. So I listened to podcasts on neuroscience and psychology and business. Mostly I let go of the business stuff because I was like, I can't do anything to save this now. Now I just have to figure out how to help me make it through this every single day and not hate myself as much as I am hating myself right now. It looks like we might go a little over an hour, so forgive me because I want to leave us on a really interesting, hopeful note here. So, I made it 9 months, give or take, and I knew my time was coming to an end, and I had a sense that I was coming to Hot Springs, but I didn't know anything about any of it. And I thought, here I can take this idea and I can translate it to this new town that I'm going to, and I will. Um, somehow it's all going to work out. And I came to Hot Springs, and the nobody was interested in my idea. It's a much more impoverished town even than where I came from. Paperwork to write for grants and things like that. I don't know. I lack the will to live. Luckily, I had to stay warm, just stay alive. I had a roof over my head after living with my aunt. I had a roof over my head, um, luck of the draw or divine timing from a woman who went to Esalen, which is where I went to school, and I had this roof over my head and the ability to actually have my own space, but it was tight and really tough. And especially that first year when there was a lot of snow and I had wet wood. So I had to chop this wet wood and it would bleed green or like a milky color, milky white, because it was so filled with water. And I had to chop it into little tiny pieces and pray over it to get it to like light up in the fireplace. And it was just cold. I was cold that whole winter and I didn't have a lot of food. And the food that I had or the money I had for food, it's because I wouldn't get on food stamps, even though I could have. And I could have had Medicaid and I wouldn't because pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but I wouldn't go get a job either. And I'm telling you all of this in case you're going through this. Because in the end, when I got the diagnosis recently, a week ago, this is all very new to me, and I don't want to be saying any of this on film, but I am. And here's why. Because if you're going through this experience too, not that it's okay, because it's really fucking painful. If you lack the will to live, it's really fucking painful. But you'll only know in hindsight that that's what was going on if you give yourself permission to live. That's what you got to do. What you have to do is give yourself permission to live, to do it, whatever it takes. And sometimes whatever it takes is not just getting any job. Sometimes it's asking for help. letting people know you're in trouble and letting them help you. Sometimes it's going and getting on social services. When I knew that the thing that was happening for me, this lack of will to live, was when I realized that if I would have gotten this diagnosis 5 years ago, don't see how I could have made it through all the things I did. And I made it harder on myself because now that I'm on some medicine, it kicked in very quickly because I'm very sensitive. And I go, I didn't have to do all the things and learn all the things. I didn't have to do it the hard way. But that would have required my ego. And my ego thought that if I got the diagnosis 5 years ago, I'd have to kill myself. Lack of will to live. Because I was afraid then. And I carried the fear with me. I carried the fear with me for 5 years instead of getting a diagnosis and feeling better and not doing the damage that I may have done. And we may or may not know. And who knows how it's all going to roll out. But it was this that actually not getting a diagnosis, not getting the blood work done was because I didn't care if I lived or died. Until I got a diagnosis that is a life sentence. It's not a death sentence. I was saying my initial reaction was, oh my God, this is a death sentence. You know what it is? It's a life sentence. It's your life has to change in some very specific ways. Life sentence. You want to live? You got to change your life. And when I talk about transformation, I'm talking about this. And I'm saying all of us in the past bunch of years have been tasked to consider our life and death and freedom and obligation or responsibilities for that freedom. And we've been hit by these um, the existential experience with the pandemic. And we did it globally and we did it um, in real time, and people having whatever neurotic health scares happen at the same time. And we can commiserate on this now. If we could get our sense of humor back, that would be very helpful. But a war came on the end of that, and this and that, and this and that, and recessions, and on and on and on. Here's the good news. The good news is this: you are here, and I am here because our ancestors persevered. That's why we're here. And whatever genetic predisposition you might have to any kind of diseases or whatever, you are here for a reason. I believe that. And that was the thread of health for me because I didn't understand that I was dealing with a lack of real will to live and failure to thrive and self-sabotage because of all of that. I was not aware of it at the time. And maybe all of those things actually saved my life. Let's say that all of it saved my life because I didn't kill myself, because I got a diagnosis I didn't want to get, because I would be required to show up for doctor's appointments I don't want to show up to. Because now, today, I can say they're all on my team. And this is the piece of hope, and peace I want to leave you with. While I was in that factory, doing a job I didn't want to do, a job I felt was beneath me because a trained monkey could do it. And my boss said, well, but you're getting paid, and a trained monkey wouldn't be getting paid. They'd be getting paid in bananas. You're getting paid. I learned to pray again, picked up some tools and tips on gratitude. What else happened? Oh, this is the point of the story. There was a moment when my mother and father came to me as columns of light in this factory. Now, I might have just lost my entire audience by speaking to this story, but they also brought with them an army, a cavalry, an army of soldiers working on my behalf. And I did ayahuasca somewhere in the mix of all of this. And there was they call them the doctors. The doctors come in and do healing work on you. And I believe that my doctors are showing up now again, and the cavalry is showing up now. And all of this that I was praying with and to and for, and my parents showing up for me on my behalf at that time and helping me to pray and recognize the army I have at my disposal on my behalf, on the behalf of my health and my life, and the importance of me being here and staying here to continue to do the work, this important work that is needed and necessary for the renaissance of human spirit, the renaissance of our time that I have to live until I'm dead. That's why this is a life sentence. So my parents come in these columns of light, and I felt their love on a level that maybe I never knew in my physical life being, because they've struggled so much as humans, as we all do. And that gave me some strength. And then doing all the difficult tasks, including getting the blood work done. That was a difficult task, and I did it. And now I know, and I can just go on and face and do what needs to be done. It's freeing in some ways. And it's a life sentence. But I've re-earned the will to live. Let's put it that way. I've gone on this self-discovery quest. Why am I here on planet Earth? And I ask people that all the time. When I say, why am I here on planet Earth? You should be saying to yourself, why am I here on planet Earth? And if you don't know, that's your task. Figure it out. And I've been on that task. I am here to create a school, a curriculum, a resource for the underdogs so that they can up level too, because we deserve it. And my mantra right now for myself is I get to enjoy the sweetness of life. I've been through a lot of hardship. I've worked hard. And it doesn't mean that I expect it all to be easy, but I deserve to enjoy the sweetness of life. And I wish that for you as well. I wish for you that you know, embody, embrace the truth of the statement. I get to enjoy the sweetness of life. I deserve to enjoy the sweetness of life. And I deserve it so that I can share it. It's not selfishness. And I believe that as I practice enjoying the sweetness of life, that my body will be healed and my being will become lighter and my sense of humor will return because I am practicing true self-care. And one of the pieces of the puzzle in our curriculum is self-care and what that looks like for each of us as an individual, because I know personally how difficult it can be, even if you know all the things, to be disciplined enough to practice self-care on a regular basis. And one of my main aims is to come back to my sense of humor. That the world deserves my sense of humor. The world deserves my sense of humor, and I deserve to enjoy the sweetness of life. And so we all win if I win, when I win, as I win. We all win. And as you win, we all win. That's why the Buddhists say, figuring out how to you be happy, figuring out how I be happy, and you figure out how you be happy and be happy. And then the whole world wins. And we win too because we get to be happy and happy. That sense of satisfaction, fulfillment, and genuine joy with the world. Happiness, as fleeting as it might be, we get to, when we give ourselves permission to do that and love ourselves enough to do it for ourselves, knowing that it translates to the rest of the world. It's a win, win, win all the way around. And it is praying and gratitude in God's glory for this good day, for this good day, to nourish the good within myself, to nourish the good within others, to create a little bit of a better day for others, nourish the good in the world, nourish it where we see it, especially within ourselves. So, all that, nearly an hour and 12 minutes. So grateful that you've been with me this period of time. You understand more about who I am, where I come from, why Remarkable You School for healing, leadership, and transformation, and why you might want to be involved with this movement. So I thank you so much. I bid you adieu. We'll be in touch soon. Take good care. Sending much love from Montana. Aho.